many of us truly understand it. What if you could make better decisions with your money? Decisions that secure your future, protect your family, and bring you peace of mind. I'm Darren Jacobs, and I'm here to help you make sense of your dollars. Welcome to Dollars and Cents, the show that breaks down the financial world in ways that matter to you. No jargon, no confusion, just real conversations about money, your money. So join me every Wednesday at 10 a.m. on WESN for Dollars and Cents.
This is 10 Questions. I'm Andy Johnson. The distance from where we should be in the world in going forward on our commitments with climate change.
The effects of climate change that cannot be accounted for, it's called loss and damage, and we're seeing loss and damage happening so much more in this decade and the previous decade.
The principal term there was this question of the correspondent banking issues.
That is why we're trying to build capacity with this country here, Trinidad and Tobago, and other countries in the region. Man
is not showing any signs of stopping or even slowing down. More than half of the forest in Trinidad is already gone.
All the plants and all the animals and all of the nice clean water and fresh air and everything had to be on this planet for humanity to have a chance.
We have small change when it comes to countries that can take decisions, and when they speak, the world listens.
The General Assembly is a very democratic forum. And Trinidad and Tobago has the same vote as Canada, in spite of the obvious difference in size.
WESN.
Apologies for not being in the studio for Talk About this morning. However, we're still going to have a show one way or the other as we count down. Now we're almost just about or just a little over a month away to the next general election. Is it the most important one? Some people might say yes. It's hard to describe as there are many dynamics that are to an extent new, that provide new opportunities for the country to change the political dynamics with the results, because it's not just about who comes into power, it's also what the results will end up being in its totality and what it might mean for the future of Trinbagonian politics. Something that I wonder if we underestimate, because we only look at the next general election. We only are concerned about who will come into power next and not necessarily what the long-term health of our political ecosystem would be. Now, one of the things coming up in the news cycle this week, a couple of points would be later on in the show, a couple of points I'll hit right now. Questions with regards to some of the commentary coming out in the media, or in two cases with regards to who are considered experts, right? One, Gary Griffith, political leader of the NTA, he is saying that the media needs to do a better job with regards to who it considers an expert and with regards to who is getting a platform, whose voices are being elevated, whose expertise is potentially being inflated or not. And the quote in today's Newsday, it's time for the national media to wake up and stop misleading the public by carelessly labeling individuals as political analysts or security experts, when in reality their track records and public commentary expose clear political bias and questionable credentials. Well, to the last part, I do find that interesting. Granted, technically Guy Griffith probably has one of the most extensive credentials in his field, compared to many other people who have spoken to the press on the basis of being somewhat of an independent expert. I mean, technically, even before he was commissioner, he was still aligned with the Congress of the People. But he was referring to two individuals that frequently speak to the media. And one of the things that he said the role of journalism is to inform, not to mislead. Credibility matters, background matters. Political alignment must be disclosed, especially when it masquerades as neutral analysis. Now, that last part is correct, at least to some extent. It is best to state your biases, and if you say that you are trying to be objective, because it's impossible to be near perfect, but let's just say, as I have said in the past, I try to be objective. I don't want to have any favored party. I have been accused of favoring probably every party that at least holds office right now at one point or the other, which doesn't necessarily make sense. When I say office, including minority parliament parties, which doesn't make sense because they're in opposition to each other. The TPP is opposed by the PNM. The PNM is opposed by the UNC. Direct competition. I can't favor all of them at the same time. I can't be biased for all of them. Doesn't make sense. Or maybe technically, if you're objective, then, well, a bit facetious, but you're biased for all of them. I guess that can work. But I think the flip side to that comes down to who has the right to say whose opinion matters more. And I guess to some extent, if the media is picking individuals who are not qualified, then it's the public to some extent to discern whether or not these opinions are valid or not. And even if the speakers are good speakers, that doesn't mean that the opinions are always going to be great. There could be a lot of disagreements. A lot of these things are going to be subjective, in part because usually talking heads could only speak about what is known, which is limited, compared to the total or the totality of any serious subject, and what is reasonable speculation. And then, of course, now the subjectivity of responsibility of how to frame reasonable speculation that's a whole other kettle of fish. The thing is, Guy Griffith's not the only one saying this. Dr. Drowley, he also has an issue with a different commentator. And what's interesting is he has reissued or brought back his concerns that he had from the last election with regards to the Council for Responsible Political Behavior, its chairman, Bishnu Raghunath. Now, he might not like Mr. Raghunath's opinion. I suggest that it's better to debate Mr. Raghunath's claims rather than attacking the individual, because it's hard for me the implication usually is this person is against me, so his opinions are invalid. That's the implication. The former Prime Minister didn't say that here, but that's the implication. By the way, he is a lecturer, I believe, of the University of the West Indies, an institution that the government has praised in the past. Now he's claiming that it's embarrassing you. But to what extent now the public also has to decide, will it tolerate, appreciate, and agree with attacking the messenger, not the message? Because one of the things that both the Prime Minister could look at, I mean, in this case, he can't claim bias because the opposition just came out. I believe it's one of their senior executive members, I think the chairman, Davindranath Thakur, came out and spoke out against this same body, and I believe to some extent this same individual. So if you've caused both the UNC and PNM to be upset at you, ironically, that actually makes me want to hear you speak more. Even if it's potentially rubbish, that alone, to some extent, in our political environment, that could be an indicator. You're only making upset because you have something to say that they don't like, usually there's substance behind it. Maybe not. I mean, at the end of the day, former Prime Minister Keith Rowley could be right. It all comes back down to if the public could discern for themselves or not, which is something that, to be honest, we might say, why should the public have to do this? But in the current global media landscape, that capacity is becoming more and more important. And we do ourselves a disservice if we want to take it for granted and water down the expectations of the public and basically treat ourselves as though we're infantile, as though we are incapable, rather than saying, well, if we're all big men and big women, we should start putting in the effort to act like that, because far too often on important issues, young professionals, young adults, middle-aged adult professionals don't want to be involved. And yet, as I said before, it's a hell of a thing to complain about the state of the country if you want to ignore the state of the country, for better or worse. And I guess it's a similar situation with Mr. Gary Griffith. I understand. Now, he goes on to say that apparently somebody labeled, I didn't read through the whole thing, I don't know who the release is, maybe if you read through the article better, somebody labeled PEP's political leader Philip Alexander as a giant. Now that I could appreciate a lot more as a political opponent to another political opponent. Why is he a giant? Of course, from my perspective, I would also say the same thing if someone said something similar about any of the political leaders. I guess to some extent. To what extent would Gary himself be a giant? To what extent would Kamala be a giant? To what extent would, I guess, in this case, you're going to say Dr. Keith Rowley or Stuart Young, to what extent they're giants? I mean, it is a subjective thing. What does that mean? But if the implication is that they are some sort of expert with all the answers, then whoever put that label on there, their opinion is to some extent campaigning. It's one of the things that I myself am going to have to be careful of, because there are those politicians whose efforts I objectively appreciate, but at the same time, to what extent will I cross the line of campaigning for them? But then now, the flip side is, if you refrain from trying to point out positive things that potentially are objectively true, will that also be unfairly prejudicing you against a certain individual, a certain party? One of the other things that tech experts have brought up, and I think this is key, and I'm not saying political parties might do this, they potentially might, supporters might do it independently, other institutions might do it independently to support or to attack a political party. But one of the another Newsday article, I believe it should be in today's papers, there's a warning from Sean Hoyt, labeled a cybersecurity expert, and I guess to some extent understand that we, the media, will label experts to some degree by default. We have decided, like I do on Talking Point with many of my contributors, to put people on who I feel have valid opinions. Expert is subjective, so maybe you should take that title with a grain of salt, even when I use it. But he has warned about the use of artificial intelligence in election campaigns based on what he has seen around the world in previous campaigns. Now, there's three things that he's pointing to: personalized messaging, chatbots, and deepfake videos. Personalized messaging, I don't necessarily think AI, that is also to some extent with regards to, or at least I believe with regards to internet advertising, which depending on your setups and how you have your online account set up and permissions set up, you will get targeted advertising to you. And to some extent, like I remember the last general, I believe it was, the UNC had a lot of ads on social media. And I believe it was targeted to me mainly because I was Trinbagonian. Not because of anything specific with regards to what I was doing, because this would have been before Talking Point and before I delved. Well, I was actually delving into local media. And I guess that was the other thing. It was targeted if I was looking up newspaper articles at the time. So to what extent we could control that, that's nefarious. I can't say, I'm not willing to say that. With regards to deepfake videos, not too sure how much we have to worry about that, depending. I mean, maybe somebody might come up with something spectacular, and depending on how realistic it is, it may warrant significant legislative changes moving forward. Because I don't know if we even have legislature to account for potential misleading videos. But the one that I'm really concerned about is chatbots. Because one of the things with regards to the internet is any sort of review, messaging forum, comment section, to some extent, there are instances in various industries, in various circles, where those things could be faked. It's one thing to look at a video and maybe find clues where the AI is not able to really generate a realistic image, moving in a realistic way. But text on a screen, to some extent, actual human beings make so much grammatical errors and spelling mistakes that it might be hard to distinguish between real individuals, for better ways, saying either the most heinous things or the most objectively true things, compared to chatbots, which essentially would be just pushing an agenda and making it seem as though there's all these people supporting this opinion, when the reality it could be all manufactured. And case in point, one of the more recent Disney movies that came out, when you look at the normal audience score, not the professional critic score, on a certain website, they've actually hidden the majority of the reviews because they were negative. And there are concerns among the industry that a lot of the reviews might be faked. Either one individual typing them all out himself, that is technically fake, trying to masquerade as multiple people's opinions, or AI. And it's not just going to be for, say, official videos from the political parties. It could be anything, any sort of news story, any individual social media post that has anything to do with a topic that could be political. All of these things can happen. And unfortunately, people have the opinion that what you see on the internet, except for news articles locally, based on your bias because you're familiar with it, but what you see on the internet generally, foreign news, some video by some quack saying whatever or the other that directly contradicts basic medical science, we'll believe it because it's on the internet. We'll believe who we think are real people giving real opinions on the internet. So that is a concern, but we'll have to see how that goes. It's just another example where our legislature has fallen behind the times. Because again, I don't know if for any of these things, we have the legislature to deal with it in any way. There's a possibility that if done, we might have zero recourse to stop it from happening. I need a legal expert maybe to weigh in on the matter, any national conversation. Doesn't have to be on WSN, on any platform available to them. Because this is 2025. And we've reached the point where we've already taken so much for granted in TNT. I mean, at some point we're going to hit 700 murders and we're going to wonder how we reached there. But maybe we should start to take front with some of these issues and be prepared. I don't know. Well, until then, we'll have to see how it goes. We have, what, 5 weeks, give or take, left? 2025. Technically, all elections are the most important elections. So, What are we going to do about it? All right, let's take a break. When we come back, we'll go into the daily review. I believe our usual appearance by our media ambassador, he won't be able to come today due to personal reasons, but we have a lot to get through from this weekend, so we'll do that after the break. Stay tuned.
My name is Dr. Joanne Williams-Carroll, and I am the Director of Behavioral and Mental Health at the Community Hospital. At the Community Hospital, we believe in nurturing mind, body, and soul. Through our counseling and chaplaincy program, we will provide you with support and strength you need to help with your mental and emotional well-being. Give us a call.
The Community Hospital of Seventh-day Adventist,
where good private health care is affordable. Do you need treatment for obesity or any related abdominal procedures? The Community Hospital now offers minimally invasive laparoscopic surgery done by an American-trained, board-certified surgeon with over 20 years' experience. Give us a call at 235-5479 for more information.
The Community Hospital of Seventh-day Adventist,
where good private health care is affordable.
We're back here and talking about WSND Content Capital, and the daily review, of course, has to start with what might be the most controversial story out of the weekend, in part because we could only assume some of the details behind the scenes, and that leaves me uncomfortable, because this is a situation where on the surface it should be not necessarily a bad resolution so far, but people have brought up in different comment sections questions that can't technically be ignored. And I'm talking about the reinstatement of formerly suspended Dr. Joel Tilak from the Southwest Regional Health Authority. Now, if you haven't seen any of the news over the weekend, particularly yesterday when most of the stories, if not all, came out, Dr. Tilak he wrote a column with regards to the opening of hospitals. And he pointed out, well, essentially, something that I maybe took for granted, but he did it to some extent with satire, with humor, and I guess you could say there was some criticism for the government. I haven't read the column myself, but essentially he's pointed to the fact that with, ironically, not necessarily the opening of a facility in his regional health authority, but I believe it was the new Port of Spain wing that was opened. He basically pointed out that, yes, we go through this, presentation, this dog and pony show, but with amongst all the political fanfare, the facilities, are they fully opened, fully equipped, fully staffed, and also, do they have all the systems in place to operate as you cut that ribbon? And the answer is no. And then now you get to the point where, and I understand, I mean, I think the airport might be in a similar situation. The thing is, this is something that Dr. Tilak is apparently pointing out with regards to hospital unveilings as a general practice. And there are further implications with regards to whenever, now this is updated or expanded facilities of a pre-existing hospital, but we do have to question, and I don't have a reasonable answer to this with regards to, well, we keep opening new hospitals. Why was the Vancouver Hospital not necessarily opened as soon as possible? It was opened, well, sometime later. It was opened at least by COVID. And where all of these resources coming from for new hospitals? Because to some extent, I personally have questions with regards to resources for pre-existing facilities before even the Keith Rowley administration. Budget for health is seemingly already tight. Now, to what extent are these things necessities or not? The thing is, there's a deeper question here with regards to what extent an employee or someone on contract could, whether satire or in all serious opinion, criticize to whatever degree, whether directly or indirectly, the employer. In this case, it is, I guess, to some extent, not so direct because, again, he's in the Southwest. The Southwest Regional Health Authority suspended him, and he was criticizing something that didn't necessarily happen. Well, at least the example that prompted the article in the Southwest Regional Health Authority. So he was speaking about a general practice, in his opinion, that he has observed. In the private sector, to what extent will this be tolerated? To what extent can it be punished? To what extent this situation would qualify something like that? Because at the end of the day, this is not just a random social media post where he's throwing shade. This is an opinion column, which he has been writing for quite some time. So the precedent is set that if you had a problem with him having an opinion column in the first place, you should have said something about it before now. Now, the Minister of Health has ordered the Southwest Regional Health Authority to reinstate him. And this, in and of itself, ironically, has been controversial. Minister of Health that says that, and I think, I mean, it all depends on if you're biased against the man or not at this point, right? I want to get the specific quote. The quote is, whilst I find his opinions and writings sometimes controversial, I am a firm believer in free speech even at my own personal expense. Now, people who are biased against the Minister of Health have already pointed out, and they have a reasonable opinion that, well, since you're the Minister of Health, or a reasonable expectation that since you're the Minister of Health, you probably would want to order the suspension in the first place. Now, here's the thing. We don't necessarily know that to be true. And at this level, if you can't prove it to be true, as much as you may suspect it or not, as much as I may suspect it or not, can't run with it. Because I know enough to know that it's quite possible somebody under the Minister of Health could have made this decision. We've seen it before very recently. I won't give the example because I don't want to distract from the conversation. Now, one could argue that the minister only intervened, even if he wasn't involved, he only intervened potentially when the public outcry became evident. Now, so this is the problem. I personally don't believe that Minister Dial Singh operated like this, but unfortunately, he has to face, like I've said before many times, the fact that the political environment will not make that an easy sell for the general public. Yes, for PNM supporters, yes, for people who have more faith in him. And I will always say that I appreciate his efforts with regards to COVID. But I can't sit here and say that I have a reasonable defense for people who have reasonable concerns over the situation. Now, one of the things I want to point out, I won't say who it was, but I saw a video by one of the members of the UNC. In it, he used a very disparaging remark to describe Stuart Young. And when I say disparaging, it's an understatement, which kind of makes almost everything he says pot calling kettle black with regards to anything Stuart Young's utterances may or may not have heard, because let's just say, in my opinion, it was a little bit worse than the hot mic incident, and this is an unforced, self-published video. things like that, ironically, make me want to believe the critics of Minister Dayal Singh even less. Now, he's also roping in Stuart Young. Again, he insulted Stuart Young in a way that was literally below the belt and unwarranted for mature political discourse. It discredits his entire video, and because of that, and is associated with that side of the argument, for lack of a better word, to some extent, it discredits that side of the argument. It shouldn't, and I don't want it to. But it just brings up the fact that now all of the people who are criticizing the minister in this case, to what extent are they biased against him? So what is left for the people in the middle? The people in the middle, I guess, don't really have much to hang their hat on, or at least much to hang their hat on in this situation that they could use to try to wade into the discourse on this matter. There's very little I could say that will persuade the people one way or the other, whether they're biased for or against the Minister of Health. All I will say is this. The Minister of Health made a statement, and the statement at the very least, when taken at face value, I appreciate significantly. Now, for better or worse, there will be certain standards put upon him. And if he could live up to those standards or continue to do so, great. I know a lot of people think that the statement in of itself is hypocritical. I am not one of those people. But we have a campaign to go through, and we have to see how this thing unfolds. And the thing is, part of it will be determined based on what happens to Dr. Tilak Singh. He is still being investigated. And remember what I said, this brings up the question to what extent the whole concept of an employer being able to tolerate or not tolerate an employee or a contractor criticizing them in a public forum. If this was the private sector, would it be allowed? Would it not be allowed? Should it be allowed? How could it be allowed? What basis can it and can it not be allowed? And of course, Dr. Tilak Singh's situation is not quite the same because, again, he's had a column. If the issue was his column, they should have brought it up earlier. One of the other things is, look, to some extent, who actually made the decision? Could have been the Minister of Health, could have been the Prime Minister, could have been Cabinet on the whole, could have been somebody in the Ministry of Health, like the Permanent Secretary, could be somebody in the SWRHA. Don't know. To some extent, these actually might be the rules. The SWRHA actually might have operated under the rules. Subjectively speaking, the rules could have existed. Again, the question is, why did it only apply now? One would wonder if perhaps Dr. Tilak Singh may have been spoken to before about his articles. To what extent was a formal process done? Was he given a letter? Was he given 2 letters? Was he given any warnings, written, verbal? Did he have meetings to consult with him moving forward? Again, the assumption is they didn't tell him that he can't. This might be something for an industrial relations lawyer to speak to. I am not versed enough to speak on the subject. But this situation opens a lot more can of worms, I think, than a lot of people would think. And perhaps the minister is only doing damage control, but at least this is a good first step. But we have to wait and see. I don't know if I am comfortable with Dr. Tilak Singh being continued to be investigated by the SWRHA, at least not without specific details on why and how this is justified. Because we are in an election period, and anything, as I said before, with regards to the opinions and commentary and the potential censorship of said commentary during this period, especially, think about it. He's been suspended after elections called. But before elections called, was he suspended? I don't think so. Was he disciplined? Well, to that extent, we don't know. But the timing makes it look worse than it is. And here's the thing, I don't expect things like this to be better under a different political party. This speaks to, I believe, a symptom that shows lack of meritocracy because there's a lack of proficiency to deal with situations. Why is it all too often that when something comes up, there's an approach that always appears to be heavy-handed and usually appears to be not well thought out and rarely appears to be well implemented? And we have something like this. Just want to hit one more story. I have been informed that we do have a backup media ambassador. So we will welcome him after the next break. But before that, I just want to get to the next story. And this is with regards to what's going on with the coalition, specifically in Diego Martin. Now, first off, Philip Edward Alexander, it has been announced that he will represent his party and I believe the wider coalition in the Port of Spain North St. Anne's West seat, going head-to-head against Prime Minister Stuart Young. An interesting decision, to say the least. I have no idea what the average voter thinks of Philip Edward Alexander. I know what people around me think of him. I don't know if anyone takes him seriously as a political candidate. He's more of an activist. Those are not the same things. He promised to give Young a run for his money. All right, we'll see. But it's understandable that, okay, the UNC has a coalition. Now they have to quickly, and I think this is the key point, while they may have understood that an election could be called at any time, I do think there were certain details that, while they may have made the decision how to handle it, it doesn't necessarily mean that they were fully prepared and everything was put in place to deal with it. So the elections were called. Of course, you have a coalition, which includes two other political parties, as well as, well, we know that there were two candidates from the OWT, well, from the unions. Not the OWT, sorry, Clyde Elder, former Communication Workers Union leader, head. But some rumblings coming from the Diego Martin Northeast executive of the UNC, which has seen what I believe to be, it was reported at least in one newspaper, 7 members of the UNC executive resigned from Diego Martin Northeast due to pressure, reportedly, or claims that they were being pressured to support the PEP leader, Philip Edward Alexander. Now, the thing is, apparently, one of the people involved, he essentially went up to be screened for the seat under the UNC, and of course, that didn't happen. So the opposition leader is basically claiming, look, this is what I was saying about all the time, you know, I want to get the correct phrasing that she did there, said here. Because she has an interesting way of putting it, that the recent party resignations are orchestrated. The predicted continuation of the orchestrated childless resignations. The thing about it is, her statements, I find, are slightly contradicting, because she's trying to lump all of the resignations as being orchestrated, which that basically implies it's of a singular purpose, of a singular entity, of a singular agenda. But then the implication is, I believe, that this specific group resigned because it could be either the chairman or the executive chairman unsuccessfully screened for a seat in Diego Martin Northeast for the UNC. And now they don't want to support Philip Alexander. The thing is, I don't think that these resignations are connected. It could appear so because oftentimes the reasons given are very similar, if not exactly the same. That implies that there could be some truth there. However, in this case, I do have to wonder to what extent this is a personal agenda and just someone playing politics. I don't know. What I do know is it seems as though this is, I guess you could say, a small example of the difference right now between the PNM and the UNC. The PNM was able somehow to smooth over the transition from Dr. Keith Rowley to Stuart Young and quiet down internal dissent to allow at least the external facade of unity so that they could move forward with this agenda. The UNC, and this is on a smaller scale, of course, we're talking about one candidate on a seat that's considered, I would assume, a PNM safe seat. It seems as though they didn't necessarily have enough time to do the prep work to smooth things over. So essentially, they tried to barrel through it. And to what extent now did the potential pressure that is claimed to be put on the individuals who essentially, well, they signed up to support the UNC. One could argue, well, you should support the coalition partner of the UNC. But then at the same time, what if you have legitimate reasons not to want to support him? It's rough, right? Now, to what extent should a party compel internal support? Is that democratic or not? But ultimately, going back to what I was originally, the point I was originally making, it seems as though they didn't have the time to smooth over some of these minor details or these finer details that potentially, if the PNM took a few more months, they would have had that time. Now, does that mean that the UNC is that much worse than the PNM? No, it's the examples don't, it's not an apples to apples comparison. It perhaps potentially sees maybe an unintended benefit for Stuart Young's decision, or maybe he knew that he might have catched them off guard in some minor ways, making it inconvenient for them and make their political campaign not so simple or as simple as it could have been. And maybe that might be enough. Apparently, the opposition leaders claiming that the UNC is polling to win this election. I have not necessarily seen those polls myself to ascertain how true or not they are. So we will have to wait and see. I'm not willing to say who's going to win right now or not, in part because part of that equation is out of the UNC's hands at the very least. It's in the hands of the people in Tobago. I don't know to what extent it's even in the hands of the PNM in Tobago. TPP right now seems to be driver's seat for at least one of the two Tobago seats, if not both. And that might cause all of the maneuvering of the PNM and the UNC to be meaningless. It'll be interesting to see how that turns out. Assuming that no other dark horse in Trinidad picks up a random seat, upsets the apple cart further, makes the math more interesting. I mean, to some extent, I hope that will be the case election night, but we'll have to wait and see. All right, let's take a break. When we come back, we'll be joined by Inspector Calendar. Stay tuned. This is Talking About on WSN. We'll be right back after this.
Do you need treatment for obesity or any related abdominal procedures? The community hospital now offers minimally invasive laparoscopic surgery done by an American-trained, board-certified surgeon with over 20 years' experience. Give us a call at 235-5479 for more information.
The Community Hospital of Seventh-day Adventist,
where good private health care is affordable.
You are watching Strictly Legal on WESN Content Capital. Just give an overview of what exactly is that split arrangement.
Now you don't need to register nothing. You don't need. We can do that another time. But then it becomes a hit, and then everybody starts to want to claim.
The laws that predate many of the independent countries' constitutions are going to be those colonial laws.
We know there are an infinite amount of circumstances that would lead to a murder.
I have a great idea and I have a great concept, but until it's actually expressed, it does not become intellectual property.
Accomplishments or targets of a forensic accountant is to quantify what may have been lost.
They believe in different criminals and we manipulated the law and we exploited the system.
A responsible journalist will reach out to the person who they have the information on for a comment.
folks. We're back and better than ever.
Your show have always appeared to be a show that is focused on going to the cause or looking to the cause.
We hardly ever talk about the white-collar crime, though. We always talk about the ones that involve more as physical violence against individuals.
The citizens will only measure transmission when water starts to flow through their taps.
The Constitution doesn't talk about local election.
Contract mafia that's responsible for looting the country, and they own and operate these politicians.
So if you are running a country and you can't say nothing as a prime minister, please take up your bag and go.
It is not comparative to the murder figures, but it is in fact very high.
I believe he's protecting certain individuals.
SM Group International Limited, your solutions partner for the latest innovations, brands and competent staff to meet your needs. We provide products and services in the following divisions: executive services, event rental and services, power and heavy equipment, construction and property management, food and beverage, aggregate and sales and distribution. Check out more on our products and services at www.smgrouptt.com. Contact us at 221-7445 or email at info@smgrouptt.com. We are SM Group International, your solutions partner.
Knowing how to tell authentic is as easy as 1, 2, 3. Find it, match it, search it. Step 1. Find the style number on the tag. Step 2. Match the style number inside the jersey with the number on the tag. Step 3. Search it. A quick Google search of the style number will verify the jersey is authentic when the search results match the jersey being searched. Don't be fooled by counterfeit jerseys. Before you buy, remember to find it, match it, search it.
Fan Zone, 2 locations nationwide: Center City Mall, Chaguanas, and Movietown, Port of Spain. Nationwide delivery available.
The best laptops and tablets are at dbesttoys.com. Get a Gateway 14.1-inch Ultra Slim notebook or an HP 14-inch laptop at the best prices in TNT. Get the Fire 7 tablet for $474. You can also shop the latest Amazon Fire Sticks. Call now at 32-DBEST to order or visit us in-store at Forces flagship MacBean. Shop online now at dbesttoys.com. Free delivery available throughout Trinidad and Tobago. Cash or links on delivery.
Every word, every line, every paragraph depicts a real moment in someone's life. A father, a sister, a mother, a brother. We at Newsday are dedicated to you, the people, and through independent, unwavering journalism, strive to always bring your stories to life. Because your stories are more than just words. Newsday, independent and credible.
Our award-winning show is back, and this season promises to be even more exciting than before. What's Up, Doc isn't just a title. It's a call to action for anyone who wants to improve their health and well-being. Join us on this thrilling ride towards better health on WESN Content Capital.
And we're back here on Talking About the WSND Content Capital Show. Michael Smoller, joined by Inspector Kurt Callender, someone has been on the program before. Welcome to have him back here on Talking Point. Thanks for joining us, Inspector Callender.
Thank you, Sean. A pleasant good morning to you, and a pleasant good morning to Trinidad and Tobago, and wherever you are tuned in the world today. Nice to be back.
Inspector, apologies for not joining you there in studio, but what you bring with us a very interesting topic, something that I guess we should not take for granted. And we have an election coming up. Of course, there will be certain security and safety concerns. But one of those things, you're going actually even further down to the basic root of it with regards to individual rights under the Constitution. The rights of our own citizens, I guess to basically say to express themselves freely to have their own opinion, their own political allegiance, to be able to support who they want to support. And I guess these are one of the things where there's a wide range of spectrums that the TTPS has to be on the lookout for, from very simple interactions to potential criminal activity when people want to express their disagreement, I guess you could say.
Yes, you're absolutely right. So I want to get to the heart of the matter by reminding persons that we do have a constitution, and the Constitution of Trinidad and Tobago speaks about the recognition and declaration of rights and freedom. And some of those rights is a personal right of the right of the individual to life, liberty, security, and of the person and enjoyment of property, and the right not to be deprived thereof except by due process of law. The right of an individual to equality before the law and protection of the law. The right of the individual to respect for his private and family life. The right of an individual to equality of treatment from any public authority in the exercise of any function, and the right to join any political parties and to express political views. The right, the freedom of movement, freedom of conscience and religious belief and observance, the freedom of thought and expression, and freedom of association and assembly, and the freedom of the press. So, enshrined in some of those rights, it did mention the freedom to support any political party, freedom of movement, and the freedom to express your political views, freedom of thoughts and expression. And of course, as you would have mentioned earlier, this is an election year, and the date for the election was announced. So we want to remind persons to respect those rights. Persons have the right to choose which political party they choose to support or not to support, and the color they choose to wear or choose not to wear, and they may or may not be, those colors may or may not be aligned to any political party, for that matter.
That's an interesting point, because I've heard in the past, not to make any disparaging remarks of a fellow CARICOM member, but let's just say another CARICOM island, some trainees who were there, I believe at UE, basically said during the elections you couldn't wear certain colors in certain areas. It wasn't safe. And that was just one of those things that kind of, to some extent, blew my mind. Is there any fear that it might get to a significantly serious and unsafe degree, sentiments like that? Is it that the TTPS is trying to kind of get in front of the situation and not wait for it to devolve and have an actual incident?
Well, thus far, history has shown that elections has come off in this country with minor issues as it relates to violence and lack of political tolerance, for want of a better word. So persons have been shown, I mean, I would have seen the supporters of both the two major political parties hugging and shaking hands, and when it's time for the candidates for the respective constituencies to be presented, I mean, you would have seen one side playing Tassa, one side have this and so on, and you are seeing that love, that unity, that tolerance, you understand, and respect for either parties, or the supporters of either parties, who they choose to support. So I don't want to go and say, well, yes, we expect violence based on the colors that people wear. It is, history has shown that that has not been the case. Whether you're supporting whichever color or whichever party, there's still that love and you know, unity and so on, even though the supporters are on separate sides of the fence and so on.
But I mean, the police is bringing up this topic. It's actually something I didn't necessarily think of, and it makes me wonder, because on a different dimension, I am concerned not during just elections, but throughout the years that Talking Point has been on, that the rhetoric at times by politicians have been very absolutist. You know, the other side is always the most wicked, vile, evil, whatever label you could put on them. And to some extent, I wonder if at some point, you know, the average man on the street who supports one party or the other might hear something, take it seriously, act on it. And that could be anything from violence, or it could be vandalism, or it could be not necessarily anything outright illegal, but just a confrontation, an argument on the street, unwilling to back down. And of course, tensions could rise and escalate and hopefully not go any further. I mean, surely there is, I guess this is a case where it's not that you hope something happens, it's not that you necessarily expect something to happen, but rather, this is just one of those things where, look, let's make sure that we're prepared and inform people. Don't let it happen now. Well, you know, it doesn't have to go that far. Would that be correct to say?
Well, from the TTPH's perspective, we are on the ground, and every political meeting that is guarded in whatever constituency it is, we are required and mandated to be there. So officers are detailed and deployed to be present in every political meeting, regardless of which political party it is. So we has adopted a proactive approach towards that, and this is across the board in just about every election. Persons are very forceful, some persons may be very forceful as it relates to their political views, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that at all. Once it does not resort to violence, once it doesn't resort to threats and intimidation and stuff like that, they are free to express their political opinion, but they have to be mindful of the fact that respect persons' right to freedom, to property, respect persons' private and public life. During campaigning, they will show up at persons' houses. One party might show up at the supporters of another party houses. You are going to get that. But at the end of the day, you have to be respectful and mindful of the fact that I may not be interested in politics. I'm not interested in supporting that political party. I'm not interested in supporting any political party for that matter. But all in all, in the past, Sean, I want to say that the campaigning we have not had any major issues as it relates to violence. You understand? You may have some minor issues like malicious damage or graffiti on the wall and stuff like that, and that is on a smaller scale. But to say that somebody lost their life because, well, I wasn't supporting that party, I was supporting this party. I went in a place, we were in a particular colored jersey, and well, that area don't support that particular jersey. I don't think that we have reached that extent, that level in Trinidad. But that being said, we still want to urge people to go on the side of caution, whereby the purpose of us as media ambassador during this election time is to remind people of what the Constitution says, right? And the persons have the right to express themselves, persons have the right to wear what color jersey they want, persons have the right to associate with whichever political party they want, and persons need to respect that.
And one of the things, so we don't necessarily have to go to violence, but obviously rights also include not to be impeded. You can't see someone supporting the other party and try to like hold them in a debate and not letting them move on. I assume, of course, also harassment.
Yep.
That would be a no-no. But then one of the basic things is obviously not violence, but when I say impeding, that also might include putting your hands on someone, touching them, you know, not even necessarily shoving them, but like, you know, at some point it's like, hey, if tensions are high, don't be reaching out to somebody in a way to maybe have a slight push or an impediment, or what could be perceived by some as a threat. You know, at the end of the day, when tensions are high, you don't really want anybody that you have an argument with touching you. Like these sorts of things, it's not that it's necessarily outright criminal, but rather you want to try to tell people, look, don't do anything to escalate tensions and maybe cause a civil disturbance amongst yourselves unnecessarily.
But you are absolutely correct. And in many instances, some of these heated discussions, for want of a better word, it usually happens in a place where they may be serving things stronger than water and juice. And that could even heighten or fuel the situation. And of course, you know, when people, if there are some persons who may not be able to control their strong mobi and so on, and things might be said, they may do certain things. So you want to urge people again to earn the side of caution. And of course, the next day, everybody good enough. I mean, nobody and holding no grudge. I mean, after election, we still have to live together. It is still one Trinidad and Tobago. And regardless of who is in power, we still have to live here. Our families are here. So let us not allow the election fever, you understand, to get the better of us. And let us not ridicule and embarrass and disrespect and intimidate others, because those are probably the same person, or some of the same person we may have to turn to after election for some level of assistance and support. So let us be wise, don't be otherwise.
Then also there might be some well-intentioned individuals that maybe might plaster one too many flyers on maybe the wrong privately owned wall. Like, obviously graffiti, I guess, would be vandalism, but to what extent do people have to understand just because you're putting up a political flyer or poster doesn't necessarily mean you could put it up any and everywhere.
Correct.
To the point where the private owner may not appreciate it, regardless of which party it is.
Correct. So I want to urge people, if you are going to place those flyers on persons' private property, make sure you get their permission first, right? Do not take it for granted because you are supporting that person or that party, that where you are going to put up that flyer, it is a given that that person supporting the same party or the same candidate that you are supporting. So get people's permission first to put anything from a political perspective on their personal property. I mean, in the public domain is fine, but personal property is a no-no, it is off limits, save and except you get the owner's permission.
The flip side of that is, because we've seen this in foreign elections abroad, particularly in the United States, where people would steal election signage, encouraging someone to vote for their candidate, and another person of different allegiance would steal the sign. Is there any protections locally, say if I have a Belize flag or a Rising Sun flag or an NTA flag or a TPP flag in my yard or a banner on my wall? Is there any protections for that to prevent anyone from basically tearing it down and potentially making off with it?
Well, I would probably encourage persons to have some CCTV cameras or probably to rely on the neighbors' CCTV cameras and so on, because from the policing perspective, it may be somewhat difficult to prevent that. Save and except somebody would get information that they probably intend to do it in the future. But other than that, protect your personal space, your private space, CCTV cameras and stuff. And of course, that is an offense, eh?
Right, exactly.
Yeah. It is an offense. So once you make a report and the police investigate and there is credible evidence, persons can be arrested and charged.
Now, one of the topics, this might be a bit not necessarily completely within the realm of this issue, but it's at least tangent to it or related to noise pollution. Is there anything to kind of control it during the election period? Now, normally, at least where I live, I don't necessarily have much complaints about noise pollution, but similar potentially to the person who might be overzealous and want to plaster vote for politician X on walls wherever they could find it, free walls wherever they could find it. There might be someone that wants to have a loudspeaker, just randomly want to espouse the virtues of their preferred candidate. And to what extent is that allowed or not allowed?
Right. So that would come under they have to apply for permission to have a march or a walk, as the case may be, and permission to use the speaker. You are also speaking about the music trucks. Similar to Carnival, they have to have the proper permit in order to be driving around in the communities playing the music or doing their broadcasting and advertising, as the case may be, because yes, it is some form of noise pollution, and the decibel levels, the permit would give you the stipulations as to how to use this permit and stuff like that. Because there are some areas that may be off limit. We're talking about the hospitals and all these kind of places and so on where they allow music. So it is very important for the political parties to do well. These are things the political parties are aware of, and they have to ensure that their supporters and whoever it is they hire to campaign alongside them or with them is aware, they are aware of all these things, and they have the proper permission and all the licenses and permission and so on to do what is required, whether it's to play the music, whether it's to use the megaphone and stuff like that. And of course, as the police, as the TTPS, it is our responsibility to ensure that they are in compliance with the law.
Now, finally, one of the things I want to ask, there might be people who feel that, their right to express themselves might be hindered or suppressed in some way, or that maybe they feel that they've been harassed in some way. Would it be a good idea for them to maybe go to the nearest police station and at the very least have an incident report or make a report on the situation for further action, potentially?
Well, that is something that we have to treat with every election, actually. Some person believe, well, they did this and they got away with it. Now we doing the same thing and only on with case, like only against we. So it is important for us as police officers to be proactive as opposed to being reactive. So once we see, well, we urge the political parties to let us know beforehand when you are having these political meetings, where you are having these political meetings, and what is the duration of these political meetings or assemblies, so that we now can be on top of it to say, well, okay, what is the expected crowd? Okay, right. So tell us who the speakers are going to be. Give us a contact number for this person. Are you going to be having music truck? Will you have a megaphone? Or would you be walking through the communities and so on, so that we can advise them accordingly? So nobody could say, well, the police picking any sides, because sometimes we get that as well.
Yeah, that seems to be one of those. Believe it or not, I have very, 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 very slight experience with that phenomenon, just being a school prefect, where, why are you bothering me? Why don't bother them? Well, give me a chance, enough time, I'll go down the line. But I have to start somewhere first, and I don't know if people kind of don't understand. Not everything is about them and being treated unfairly. Because other people breaking the law is not necessarily doesn't allow you to then break the law.
Exactly, and you see what people fail to understand too, Sean, is that once you are using the road, you see once you are using the roadway, it becomes very ticklish because it interferes with the free flow of traffic. It hinders other road users who may not necessarily be part of your entourage and may not be campaigning. So we want to be ahead of this thing to make sure you apply in advance so that you can get the proper, not only get the proper permission, but that we could put things in place to ensure there is a smooth transition for you from point A to point B without there being any major interference for the other road users. And also this from a safety and security perspective, because we are speaking about music trucks and persons behind this, similar to Carnival. And we would have had some unfortunate events where persons were crushed by these trucks. So we want to prevent that by telling you, you know what, come and see us. Come and see the inspector, come and see the sergeant. How many political meetings you intend to have? Where you intend to have these political meetings? What are the times? What would you be having music? Would you be having a megaphone? Would you be having this? So we can properly advise you. So both the TTPS and those persons can be on the same page. They know what is required of them. We know what is required of us.
All right, folks. It's interesting. I mean, maybe I'm too much of a pessimist, Inspector Callender, but I hope you're right. I hope that we will, at the end of the day, kind of come back together as one nation. Although I see some of the division throughout the year. Maybe that's a lot of keyboard warriors on the internet and not so much in person. When people get in person, they boil down. I hope that proves to be true. Or maybe people are starting to realize we can't take our peace for granted. What we're going to do, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll open the phone lines to close out the show this morning. This is Talking About on WSN. We'll be right back after this.
Hi, I'm Claudette, radiographer at the radiology departments at the community hospital. We offer high-quality service with state-of-the-art equipment in X-ray, ultrasound, CT, and mammogram. Come, our friendly staff awaits you.
Give us a call at 235-5479.
The Community Hospital of Seventh-day Adventist,
where good private health care is affordable.
Our award-winning show is back, and this season promises to be even more exciting than before. What's Up, Doc isn't just a title. It's a call to action for anyone who wants to improve their health and well-being. Join us on this thrilling ride towards better health on WESN Content Capital.
This is Face of Sports, WESN Content Capital. How you felt about the kiss on the lip?
That's the business. I'm nothing to do with that.
I find that was distasteful.
The national senior team, whether you like it or not, that is the model for all other teams to follow.
I'm assuming that the regional requirement may be a much stricter requirement.
This is not about Pro League and Super League. This is a league run by the Normalization Committee that I'm responsible for.
Nobody expected FIFA to fund this arrangement.
If we don't get a professional attitude towards this, we are doomed for failure.
You break the balance, trip the leg, control the body.
They ain't gonna stand put forever.
Why you want the Chiefs to lose so? Why you want the Chiefs to lose so?
They already have two. Lamar
Why?
have.
You're jealous because you know the Chiefs getting closer to the Patriots. Let's go to the last part.
No,
of the
not no.
Let's go to the last part.
And we're back on WSN, the Content Capital Show. Michael Small, joined by Inspector Kurt Callender, TTPS Media Ambassador, one of the several media masters we've had on the show. ASP Arun wasn't able to join us today due to personal reasons, so we are thankful that Inspector Callender was able to join us. Now, of course, is the time that we open up the phone lines. We want to hear from you, the viewer. You can call in and have your say. I would just again reiterate the point. If you are on air with us, please mute your television once you get on air. Do not try to follow the show and wait until you see on the show that you're on air. Listen to your phone when we tell you you're on air, you're on air. Don't try to do both because it will be confusing because there's a delay. So with that said, we're opening up the phone lines. You could call in. You could have questions for for Inspector Callender. If you have any procedural questions with regards to policing or any situations that you might find yourself in, and of course you could speak on the topics that I've spoken so far today, or topics that I have not reached today. There were quite a few things out in the news, some large, some small, coming out from the news this weekend. But as we continue on, and we have Inspector Callender here, I guess one of the things that Inspector Callender, I take for granted and I don't know to what extent you're involved with this, but we do see the missing persons reports. Usually it's a lot of young girls, sometimes young boys, sometimes grown adults. Sometimes there's resolution, sometimes there is not. This is one of the things where I don't know, is the public really kind of giving the feedback? Because one of the things that I fear with murders, I myself, I can't follow all of them. They are what they are. You know, the more gruesome they are, the more depressing they are. It's just one of those things where you kind of have to follow it, but you really don't want to. With missing people, you know, sometimes they're found, all is well, sometimes they're not. And I do wonder if, does the TTPS kind of feel that maybe the society is kind of taking it for granted now whenever there's missing persons reports? Or are you getting enough engagement to try to get a resolution to these cases?
We have some challenges. Because of the fact that the TTPS has changed up, for want of a better word, the way how we investigate missing person, of course, you no longer have to wait until 24 hours to report somebody missing. It is as soon as possible based on their routine, their daily routine, and how well you know the person. So for example, a child is expected to come home from school 4, 5 o'clock. 10 o'clock, they have not returned home. You are free to come to the station to make a report of a missing person, 8 o'clock for that matter. So the reports, and sometimes it might just be a basic breakdown in communication where the child didn't inform the parents where they're going and stuff like that, and the child turns up less than 24 hours later. But that being said, we really want the parents, for that matter, to educate their children as it relates to communication and the importance of communication, because once a report of a missing person is made, the Homicide Bureau is also informed, as well as the Anti-Kidnapping Squad, because it could turn out to be a kidnapping, and some missing person report has turned out to be a homicide. So you see the amount of resources that is already engaged simply by you reporting someone missing. And the child may turn up less than 24 later indicating, well, I went by a friend because I was stressed and so on. And I am saying the child needs to be properly educated by the parent as it relates to what they are not only putting their parents through, but what is required for us as, in the TTPS as it relates to the resources that we have to dispense. And we are not saying that we don't want to dispense these resources, and not because we are required to do so. But the resources that has been dispensed into this report, and it turned out to be somewhat frivolous, for want of a better word, and I'm not trivializing your child going missing. I am simply saying a lot of work and effort and resources is required and has to put into that, right? So we want to urge the parents, the guardians, the personal responsibility for the children themselves. I mean, we go into the schools to the community-oriented policing section to lecture the children as it on these things, but some take it seriously, some don't take it seriously. So, and of course, there are times where persons report themselves missing, and it turned out to be bogus, and they are charged for wasteful employment of the police time.
What would be the, before we get into the end of the SOE, what would be the reasons potentially for wanting to do that? Because unless there's some sort of insurance fraud, which I don't expect most of these cases to be, why would they, just why?
The answers are quite interesting. I think somebody reported, reported themselves missing and end up in Tobago. And he said he was kidnapped and taken to Tobago. And I think that matter is still before the court, so I can't get too deeply into it. But it turned out to be a fictitious report. One person reported themselves missing or kidnapped, tie up their own self, put themselves in a trunk. And I can go on and on, Sean, and It is just amazing the stories and how creative Trinidadians and Tobagonians can be, because they must say didn't go to work, or they didn't go home, or they was with somebody else they wasn't supposed to be with, where they wasn't supposed to be. So they make up all kinds of bogus stories to their parents, their spouses, their employers, and we, the police, have to investigate. And as it turns out, they eventually come clean and say, well, officer, let me tell you what it is really happened. And of course, they will be charged for wasteful employment of the police time. So you want to urge people to be truthful? I think
it just, I'm not doubting you, because I actually know of a similar incident, not necessarily a fake kidnapping. I know a similar incident. I just find it very ridiculous. I believe this to be 100% true, though, folks. I'm not disbelieving Inspector Garner at all. It is ridiculous that in the great wisdom of some of our citizens, I don't want to get in trouble with my spouse or my job, so I rather get in trouble with the police.
Interesting.
Right? I don't know if anyone thought it through when making that decision. We'll get into the end of the essay because I have a question with regards to police manpower. But before that, we have a caller from San Juan. Good morning, caller. You on here?
Morning, Mr. Small.
Morning.
And morning to the officer there, the ESP.
Morning to you.
Yeah.
Inspector.
I'm going on something else here, Small. I called the other day in connection with Kokoloko. If you don't know the name Kokoloko, that is Ruston Road, Tudge Road, right, about water. They still, whoever it is in control of that area, are begging them to stop the political wickedness against the poor people here in this country. I belong to a small group that have been investigating this opposition we had in Parliament for quite a while, and from 2016 to now, gentlemen, they upped the antics to bring down this government that went all over the world like paupers begging to bring people here to put money back in that treasury that is still holding. They're spending the money in the ministries to disrupt the services of the poor people, and then Granny saying she care, and this and that and the other. We're not taking that this time. Officer, sorry to be this way this morning, but it did reach a point. These people don't know the culture of Trinidad and Tobago. They do not know the culture of Trinidad and Tobago. They're going to put the second richest people in the land, thanks to the PNM, which is the Fazal Razak children, in trouble. And I don't want to see that as an indigenous woman's son. I'm begging the creator to keep this thing under low. The police under pressure. Why? Bail for murder. Look how much murders take place after that. Gunmen, you get hold of the IR-15 that themselves bringing in the business. One of them, not much, about 6, but they scatter. Cuba Central, Cuba and Central, and Sandy Grady officer. Right? Stop interfering with the ministry, especially the water. These people giving the people water 12 o'clock in the night when people sleeping. When they get up in the morning, they tap empty and they quarreling. Give the people the water. Right? Gentlemen, be safe. And may the Great Spirit put his hand on this land. And Mikila Pandey, we calling on you, Dudu. We want you in that parliament in opposition to learn something. Watch how these people do in their business. And from there, you're going to strengthen yourself. Good day.
Thank you, caller. A couple of things. The nighttime water pressure, that's probably because not everybody is awake at that time, so the water pressure has a chance to actually reach everywhere. And I think that's a regular occurrence across the country. The problem with that is it's making it almost like a prerequisite to have a water tank for you to properly live and function. And to what extent is that financially not feasible for everybody, therefore not fair at the end of the day? Granted, like, I would advise people who can't afford it for that very same situation. At night, when the pressure is higher, you could get water in your tank so that you have it during the day. essentially my area, to some extent, that's how we have to live. One of the problems with water, unlike electricity, each area kind of is its own mini water supply system in and of itself. So a lot of, just because there's water in the north doesn't mean it's going to be water in the south and vice versa. And just because there's water in parts of north doesn't mean there's going to be water in all of north. And throughout the country, that holds true. It's not so much the ministry itself and the person in charge of the ministry or the local government people, but arguably for some areas it comes down to the budget and the allocation for new projects. The former Minister of Public Utilities was opening new wells and new supplies of water. To what extent was that enough? To what extent was that fast enough? To what extent will that continue regardless of who wins the election? And I agree with you. I do feel impartially with your statement. I don't think politicians understand all of the culture of TNT and what everybody's going through. But, you know, to what extent will the voters kind of hold their representatives to account to represent them, as opposed to just being instruments for them to get into higher office and then potentially ignored for the next 5 years, depending on where you are. Inspector Calendar, I know water issues are not necessarily a forte, so we'll switch gears to the conversation as we just come to a close. The SOE is coming to an end in about a week's time, but ironically, now of course, if it was extended, the police would have to continue at that high level of activity for another 3 months, is it? But we're in an election, so I assume, even though technically Carnival has already happened and the SOE is coming to a close, there is not much rest for the weary in the TTPS, I guess, at least for the next 5 or so weeks.
Absolutely, and I think if I'm not mistaken, the THA election is also carded for 2025. So it's from Christmas to Carnival to election to Easter, probably another election, and it goes on and on. So that had been happening since before COVID actually, so we have had 5+ years of the police service going almost round the clock. So, but we are the premier law enforcement agency in the country, and we want to give the public that level of assurance and commitment that we would continue to do what is required of us as it relates to the maintenance of law and order, and to ensure that every place in Trinidad and Tobago is safe.
Well, folks, we're more or less out of time. This seems to be like a very busy Monday morning where everybody got up and at 'em and out of the door and had stuff to do. So I want to just thank a caller from San Juan. I want to thank Inspector Calendar for making his way here, getting the call, you know, at the 11th hour, but still making himself better always better dressed than me every time he comes here. You know, you make it a habit. I don't appreciate you showing me up on my own show, Inspector Calendar. You know, this is not right. You know, you don't have to look so sharp all the time.
I would do my best. I would do my best the next time.
No, that's the problem. Stop doing so well. Stop doing your best. A little bit less. You know, come meet me halfway.
I mean, I tried. I tried. I said, look, I would dress down today. But then I said, you know what, I mean, the standard has already been set, so I might as well maintain it.
All right, fair enough. All right, that is true. You have to meet the expectations of the people. Yeah. With that said, folks, we'll come to a close here on Talking about the WES. And I want to remind you, of course, first I'll start. It's nice to be nice. Our police potentially have been overweight for the last, I don't know how many years at this point. Regardless of what your interactions are with them or not, they are good officers. There might be some bad apples. It's nice to be nice. Put that best foot forward when you interact with them and comply to ensure that tensions aren't escalated with the police. They are the lawful authority at the end of the day. If anything untoward happen, you can make the complaints afterwards. But for the sake of everybody, and to some extent, you don't know what that officer's been through during his shift, how much work he's had to put in and how much stress that he's been under. So it's nice to be nice, folks. Stay safe out there. Make today a good day, as Mr. Shah would always say. And remember your allegiance to the Republic and to each other during this election period. For the good of the country and for the good of the party is not always the same thing. And perhaps maybe if we could figure out which party is going to allow that to be equal, then that might be the clue of who to vote for. Of course, it's all subjective, folks, but we'll see how things turn out on the 28th of April. Until then, we'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
WESN.
Do you need treatment for obesity or any related abdominal procedures? The community hospital now offers minimally invasive laparoscopic surgery done by an American-trained, board-certified surgeon with over 20 years' experience. Give us a call at 235-5479 for more information.
The Community Hospital of Seventh-day Adventist,
where good private health care is affordable.
SM Group International Limited, your solutions partner for the latest innovations, brands, and competent staff to meet your needs. We provide products and services in the following divisions: executive services, event rental and services, power and heavy equipment, construction and property management, food and beverage, aggregate and sales and distribution. Check out more on our products and services at www.smgrouptt.com. Contact us at 221-7445 or email at info@smgrouptt.com. We are SM Group International, your solutions partner.